The smoke still rose from Cathara IV 3 days after the ceasefire, thin columns of gray against a sky the color of old bruises. Sergeant Ryder Nash picked his way through the ruins of what intelligence had labeled a Valar medical compound, though compound was generous for the scattered wreckage of crystalline structures that looked like someone had dropped a chandelier from orbit. His boots crunched on debris that might have been architecture or might have been art. The Valar didn't really distinguish between the two. His unit had evacuated 6 hours ago when the treaty negotiators declared this sector neutral ground, which was diplomatic speak for nobody won so everybody leave. Ryder had volunteered to stay behind for final sweeps. Someone had to check for survivors, and his combat medic training made him the logical choice, even though he'd been reclassified as infantry after taking shrapnel to the shoulder that left his hands too unsteady for surgery. He could still handle a rifle and read a med scanner, which made him qualified enough for cleanup duty. The compound was a graveyard. Ryder had seen enough of those to recognize the specific silence that came after violence. The way sound itself seemed reluctant to disturb the aftermath. He moved through the wreckage methodically, scanning for life signs and finding nothing but false positives from damaged equipment and the occasional scavenger drone picking through the rubble. That's when he saw her. She lay in what had once been a courtyard, surrounded by the shattered remains of something that might have been a fountain or possibly a medical device. Valar technology had a habit of looking decorative even when it was functional. Her body was motionless, unnaturally still in a way that made Ryder's medic instincts scream wrongness. But her eyes moved, tracking his approach with an awareness that meant she was conscious and very much alive. Ryder knelt beside her, his rifle slung across his back, and pulled out his med scanner. The device protested immediately. Valar physiology wasn't in its standard database, but it gave him enough information to know she was in serious trouble. Elevated stress markers, erratic neural activity, and something his scanner labeled systemic paralysis, with the kind of uncertainty that suggested it was guessing. She was Valar, obviously. Her skin had that distinctive silver undertone that made them look like they'd been dusted with starlight, though right now it was more gray than silver, bruised and torn in places where debris had cut through her clothing. Her ears rose from her skull in elegant tapers, longer than human ears, currently caked with dust and blood. Around her neck hung a pendant that even Ryder's limited cultural knowledge recognized as high caste insignia. He activated his translator, a bulky unit clipped to his vest that had been more useful than his rifle in the last 3 months of this war. "Can you hear me? I'm Human Coalition, combat medic. I'm going to help you." Her eyes fixed on his face. Her lips moved, forming words his translator caught as fragmented syllables before assembling them into standard. "Leave. Not worth. Resources." "Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and ignore that," Ryder said. He scanned the area looking for the evacuation routes. They were obvious once he knew what to look for: clear paths through the rubble where vehicles had passed, tracks from Valar military transports. Fresh tracks, recent evacuation. They'd gone around her position deliberately. Her own people had left her behind. Ryder had seen a lot of terrible things in this war, but something about that particular flavor of terrible made his jaw tighten. He looked down at her, at those aware, tracking eyes in a body that couldn't move, and made a decision that was probably going to get him court-martialed if it didn't get him killed first. "Okay," he said, setting down his pack. "Here's the situation. Your people left, my people left, and we're both technically violating the ceasefire by being here. But I'm not leaving you, and you can't exactly walk, so we're going to have to get creative." He pulled out his medical supplies, such as they were after 3 months of extended deployment. Field dressings, synthetic skin, a nerve stimulator he'd been saving for emergencies, and about 6 different drugs he wasn't technically qualified to prescribe anymore. His hands shook slightly as he worked. The shrapnel damage to his shoulder had left him with a tremor he couldn't quite control, but he'd learned to work around it. The woman watched him with an expression he couldn't read. Her translator pendant activated, her voice coming through with crystalline clarity despite her physical stillness. You should not. I am broken, not viable for. For what? Rescue, recovery. Ryder applied a field dressing to a gash on her arm, his movements automatic. Yeah, I'm going to need you to explain that philosophy to me later when you're not actively dying. Right now, I'm going to stabilize you, figure out what's wrong, and then we're going to have a serious conversation about your people's triage protocols. He worked through the golden hour, that critical window where intervention meant the difference between life and death. The nerve stimulator helped. He attached it to her spine at points his scanner suggested were analogous to human neural pathways, and her autonomic systems began functioning more regularly. Her breathing steadied. The gray tint to her skin faded slightly, but she still couldn't move anything below her neck. Neural shock, Ryder muttered, reading his scanner's best guess. Trauma to your spinal column, maybe. Or something specific to your physiology I don't understand. He looked at her. Can you tell me what happened? Her eyes closed briefly, then opened. When she spoke, her voice carried something that might have been shame. I was injured. Fell during retreat, could not move, could not connect to the communion. Without connection I am. She searched for the word, severed, dead in purpose if not body. They left me because it is mercy, resources for the living, not the broken. Ryder sat back on his heels. That is categorically the dumbest thing I have ever heard, and I once watched a private try to microwave an MRE without opening it first. He began constructing a harness from his combat webbing and medical gel packs, his hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the tremor. You're paralyzed, not dead. Paralysis can be treated. Hell, half my squad has some kind of injury that would have been career-ending a century ago. We adapt. We heal. We definitely don't leave people in rubble to die. Something shifted in her expression. You are angry for me. I'm angry in general. It's been a long war. He tested the harness, making sure it would distribute her weight without cutting off circulation. But yeah, leaving someone behind because they got hurt. That makes me specifically angry. She made a sound that his translator took several seconds to process, then labeled as laughter. It was small, broken at the edges, but genuine. What's your name? Ryder asked, adjusting the harness straps. Saris Valen, house of. She paused. It does not matter now, I have no house. Ryder Nash. No house, just a serial number and questionable life choices. He checked the horizon. Dawn was breaking, painting the ruins in shades of amber and gold that would have been beautiful if everything wasn't so thoroughly destroyed. We need to move. Human extraction point is about 15 kilometers north. Think you can handle being carried? Saris's eyes widened slightly. You would carry me. Already did the math. You're maybe 60 kilos. I can march 30 clicks with a full pack. 15 with you should be manageable if we take breaks. He began securing her to the harness. Fair warning, I'm going to be talking the entire time. It helps me focus and keeps you conscious. You're going to learn way too much about my opinions on military ration bars. He hoisted her onto his back, adjusting her weight until the harness distributed it properly. She was lighter than he'd expected, her bone structure more delicate than human despite the similar overall build. He could feel her breathing against his shoulder, rapid and shallow. Saris, he said, starting the long walk north. I need you to stay with me, okay? Talk to me. Tell me about Valor. Tell me anything, just stay conscious. Her voice came through the translator, quiet but steady. Why are you doing this? Ryder adjusted his grip, his boots finding purchase on uncertain ground. The ruins stretched ahead of them, and somewhere beyond the horizon was safety, extraction, and probably a lot of very angry superior officers. Because someone has to, he said, and I'm here. Behind them the smoke continued to rise. Ahead, the sun climbed higher, indifferent to the small act of defiance happening below. Saris Valen whispered something in her own language that his translator didn't catch, but Ryder felt the weight of it settle between them like a promise neither of them had made yet. He kept walking. The first 3 hours were manageable. Ryder fell into the rhythm of forced march, the kind of steady pace he could maintain indefinitely if his body didn't require inconvenient things like water and rest. Saris remained silent for the first hour, then began speaking in fragments, descriptions of Valar cities that sang at dawn, neural gardens where her people shared dreams directly. The way communion felt like being part of something vast and beautiful. "Sounds nice," Ryder said, pausing to check his scanner for patrol activity. "Clear for now. We've got something similar called the Internet, except instead of sharing dreams, we mostly share arguments and pictures of food." That got another small laugh from her. He was starting to collect those laughs, counting them like victories. By hour 4, the terrain turned hostile. The ceasefire hadn't extended to the automated defenses scattered throughout the sector, drones and mines that operated on programming too stupid to understand that the war had paused. Ryder had to detour twice to avoid drone swarms, his legs burning with the extra distance. "Tell me about Earth," Saris said during one of their brief rest stops. Ryder had propped her against a collapsed wall while he rationed water and checked her vitals. "I have seen briefings, but those are clinical. Tell me what it is like." Ryder took a long drink, his throat dry from talking and breathing dust. "It's loud, that's the first thing. Cities are loud. Forests are loud in different ways. Even the deserts have sound if you listen close enough. We've got oceans that cover most of the planet, massive bodies of water that move in ways that'll make you seasick if you're not used to them. My sister lives near one. She's a terrible cook but an excellent surfer, which is a thing we do where we ride waves on boards and pretend we're not about to drown." "Your sister," Saris repeated. "You have family." "Yeah, Claire. She's 5 years younger and about 10 times smarter. She's the one who should have joined the military. She's got the discipline for it. I just had the grades and the naive belief that I could make a difference." He stood, stretching muscles that protested the movement, ready to keep going. "I should not be able to slow you," Saris said. "If you left me, you would reach safety faster." "If I wanted to reach safety faster, I would have stayed home and become an accountant like my mother wanted." Ryder hoisted her onto his back again, adjusting the harness. "Besides, you're not slowing me down. You're giving me something to carry besides my own bad decisions, which is honestly refreshing." They moved through the late afternoon in relative peace, Ryder maintaining a running commentary about everything from Earth weather patterns to the deeply suspicious origin of military coffee. Saris told him about Valar biology, their neural networks, the way her people experienced consciousness as something shared rather than isolated. "That is why paralysis is death," she explained. "Without the ability to connect to the communion, I am alone. A Valar alone is not fully alive. We are meant to be part of the collective consciousness." "Sounds claustrophobic," Ryder said. "It sounds lonely to be human." "Yeah, well, we manage. Mostly by talking too much and forming questionable attachments to people we've known for less than a day." Saris was quiet for a moment. Then, Nalith Kar. "What's that?" "Something my grandmother would say. It means soul carrier, one who carries another from death into life. It is old tradition, ancient. I'm just carrying you to an extraction point. You are carrying me away from death. There is a difference." Ryder didn't have a response for that, so he kept walking. They were 12 kilometers from the extraction point when the ambush happened. Ryder's scanner screamed a warning half a second before the Valar strike team materialized from active camouflage, weapons trained on him from 3 directions. He froze, hands carefully away from his rifle. The leader stepped forward, her armor marked with insignia. Ryder's translator identified as commander rank. She was tall even for Valar, her expression carved from ice and authority. She spoke in her own language, sharp syllables that his translator rendered as, "Release the defective one, human. You are transporting a Valar citizen in violation of retreat protocols." Ryder felt Saris tense against his back. I'm transporting an injured person who was left to die. That's called a rescue, not a kidnapping. The commander's eyes narrowed. Saris Valen is marked as non-viable. You are interfering with military decision-making. Release her immediately. Yeah, that's going to be a problem, Ryder said. See, I've got this thing about leaving injured people in rubble. Call it a personality flaw. Sarah spoke then, her voice stronger than Ryder had heard it all day. She said something in rapid velar that made the entire strike team freeze. The commander's expression shifted from cold authority to something that looked almost like fear. What did you tell them? Ryder asked quietly. That you invoked Nalith Kar, that you carried me from certain death, that by ancient law you are now my soulbound protector. I'm your what? The commander spoke again, her tone changed, careful now. Saris Valen, you cannot invoke the life bond oath. You are severed from communion. The bond is not valid. The bond existed before communion, Saris replied. It is older than our networks, older than our cities. This human saw me dying and chose to carry me to life. The Nalith Kar is invoked whether you acknowledge it or not. The strike team withdrew slowly, weapons still trained but no longer aimed directly at Ryder's head. The commander's final words came through his translator with crystalline clarity. The life bond is ancient law, but it will make you both targets. You have invoked something that should have remained forgotten. They disappeared back into active camouflage, leaving Ryder standing in the middle of the wasteland with more questions than he'd had 5 minutes ago. So, he said, adjusting Saris's weight and resuming his march. Want to explain what just happened? I may have bound us together, legally, permanently, in the eyes of every Valar in existence. Ryder laughed, it came out slightly hysterical. Well, that's new. Usually, I have to buy someone dinner first before we get permanently bound. I am sorry, Saris said softly, but it was the only way to make them leave us. The life bond cannot be disputed. You saved me. That makes you mine, and me yours until death. No pressure then. By the time they reached the human extraction point, Saris had fallen unconscious, and Ryder was running on military stimulants and pure spite. The guards at the perimeter had to catch him before he collapsed, Saris still strapped to his back, both of them covered in dust and blood, and the weight of something neither of them had asked for but couldn't now escape. Ryder woke to fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. His shoulder ached where the shrapnel damage had been aggravated by carrying Saris, and every muscle in his body filed formal complaints with his nervous system. A nurse noticed him stirring and immediately called for a doctor, which meant Ryder was about to get either very good news or a court-martial. He got both. Captain Martinez entered his recovery room with the expression of someone who'd been asked to explain quantum physics to a toddler and was already regretting all his life choices. Sergeant, that's good news, so why do you look like you want to shoot me? Because you've created a diplomatic incident that's currently being discussed at the highest levels of both governments. Martinez pulled up a holographic display showing legal documents in 2 languages. The Valar are claiming you invoked something called Nalith Kar, the life bond oath. Are you aware of what that means? I'm aware that I carried an injured person to safety, and apparently that has cultural significance I wasn't briefed on. It means you're legally bound to her. In Valar law, you're her soulbound protector and consort. You have legal standing in their culture, access to their systems, responsibility for her well-being. It also means you're now a target for anyone who wants her silenced. Ryder sat up despite his body's protests. Silence for what? Martinez's expression darkened. That's the interesting part. Saris Valen wasn't just any soldier. She was an intelligence officer investigating potential war crimes within her own command structure. Her paralysis wasn't from combat injury. She was poisoned. The substance used was designed to sever her neural connections permanently, kill her slowly while making it look like battlefield trauma. The room went very quiet. Ryder's hands clenched into fists despite the tremor. Her own people tried to murder her. And you carried her out of there before they could finish the job, which makes you either a hero or a massive problem, depending on who you ask. Martinez closed the holographic display. Human Command wants you to reject the life bond, publicly deny it. It would simplify things diplomatically. And if I don't, then you're stuck with her, literally. Valor law doesn't allow for dissolution of Nalith Kar except through death. You'd be responsible for her recovery, her protection, her life. You'd have legal standing in their culture, but you'd also be making enemies of some very powerful people who want her forgotten. Ryder thought about Saris's eyes tracking him in the rubble, about the way she'd laughed despite everything, about being left to die because her people considered her broken and inconvenient. Where is she now? Recovery Ward, Section 7. She's been asking for you. Ryder stood, ignoring the way his legs threatened to give out. Then that's where I'm going. Martinez stepped aside. For what it's worth, Nash, what you did was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. Try not to start a war by accident. No promises. The recovery ward was quieter than the main medical facility, designed for long-term treatment rather than emergency care. Ryder found Saris in a private room surrounded by equipment that looked like it couldn't decide if it was medical technology or modern art. She was awake, propped up at an angle, and when she saw him, her expression transformed into something that made his chest tight. "You came," she said. "Yeah, well, apparently I'm legally obligated now, something about being your sole carrier." He pulled up a chair, sat down heavily. "They told me what happened, the poisoning, the cover-up." Saris's eyes closed briefly. "I discovered evidence. Civilian populations targeted deliberately, orders that violated every treaty we ever signed. I was going to report it, but—" She gestured at her immobile body. "My commander found out. This was easier than a trial. That's going to change. How? I cannot move. I cannot testify. I am severed from communion, which means my word has no weight in Valor law. I am." "You're not alone," Ryder interrupted. "That's what Nalith Kar means, right? I carried you from death, which means I'm bound to you, which means your fight is my fight now. You barely know me. I know you didn't deserve to be left in rubble. I know you were trying to do the right thing and got punished for it. That's enough." Over the next 3 weeks, Ryder spent more time in Saris's recovery room than his own quarters. He learned Valor physical therapy techniques, helped her through painful sessions where experimental treatments tried to rebuild neural pathways that had been deliberately destroyed. The process was agonizing. Saris would cry out in her own language, her body convulsing as damaged nerves learned to fire again. But slowly, impossibly, it worked. First, she regained sensation in her fingers, then movement, small twitches that became deliberate motion. While she healed, they compiled evidence. Saris had hidden data crystals before her poisoning, fragments of orders and communications that proved her commander had authorized civilian massacres. Ryder helped her access secure channels, using his new legal standing in Valor culture to navigate systems that would have been closed to any other human. The joint tribunal overseeing the ceasefire listened to their testimony, watched the evidence unfold. The proceedings took 2 months, during which Saris progressed from finger movement to arm mobility to, finally, the ability to sit up unassisted. The verdict came down hard: arrests, dishonor. Both governments forced to confront the ugly compromises they'd made during the war. Saris's commander was stripped of rank and exiled, a fate considered worse than death in Valor culture. Through it all, Ryder stayed. Not because the life bond required it, but because somewhere between carrying her through ruins and watching her cry through physical therapy, duty had transformed into something else. Something he couldn't quite name but recognized in the way she looked at him, the way her hand found his during the worst moments. The day Saris took her first steps, Ryder was there. She gripped his arms, her legs shaking with effort, every muscle screaming from atrophy and reconstruction. 3 steps across the recovery room, then 4, then 5 before she collapsed against him, laughing and crying simultaneously. "I am walking," she said against his shoulder. "I am walking and I can feel the ground and I am not alone." "No," Ryder agreed, "you're not alone." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright with tears and triumph. "Nalith Kar. Soul Carrier, do you understand now what it means?" "I'm starting to get the picture. In Valar tradition, the one who carries you from death into life carries a piece of your soul forever. You are bound to me, and I to you. Not by law or duty, but by recognition. You saw me when others called me broken. You carried me when others left me to die. That is Nalith Kar." Ryder smiled, helping her back to the bed. "I'm not qualified to carry anyone's soul. I can barely carry my own emotional baggage." "Then we will carry each other's," Sarah said simply. "That is what soulbond means." 6 months after the ceasefire, Ryder Nash and Saras Valen stood before the joint tribunal one final time. Not as witnesses but as advocates, presenting proposals for shared medical technology, cultural exchange programs, and trauma recovery initiatives for soldiers on both sides. Saras walked to the podium on her own, her gait still slightly unsteady but improving every day. Ryder stood beside her, close enough to catch her if she fell but knowing she wouldn't. After the session ended, they walked through the gardens of the joint facility, taking the kind of slow, aimless path people take when they're not running from anything anymore. Saras's hand found his, her grip strong and certain. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Return to Earth, resume your career." "I was thinking about staying in joint species medical research. Turns out carrying one paralyzed alien to safety qualifies you for all kinds of interesting work." He glanced at her. "Plus, someone has to make sure you don't overdo the physical therapy." "I do not overdo." "You absolutely overdo everything. It's one of your more endearing qualities." Saras laughed, the sound fuller now unbroken. "Then I suppose you will have to stay and monitor me, for medical reasons." "For medical reasons," Ryder agreed, "and maybe some other reasons too." They walked together through the gardens where human flowers grew alongside Valar crystalline plants, two species learning to share the same soil. Behind them, the war was fading into history. Ahead, the future remained uncertain but possible.